So about 6 or 8 months now ago, it may have been even longer. COVID is compressing time, and before we weren't allowed to gather. I was asked to speak on a panel about work-life balance. And now, if you listen to me, and you do, I think work-life balance is a myth. So of course, I was the contrarian on the panel. But I got to speak with a few other really wonderful people, and I met our next guest, listened to her talk, and was captivated. I fell in love immediately. Knew I needed to be in her life, but I also knew I needed to share her with you. Miki Tolliver King, I got that right, Miki? Miki
Yes, that's
Tolliver
right.
King. We're going to go through her accomplishments, but she's here because of who she is. She is the CMO of the Washington Post. That's a big deal. She used to be the VP of operations at Politico. She does charity work. She's on the board of the advisory board for So Others May Eat, which I just absolutely love. She's on the board of directors for International Women's Media. She was a practicing attorney. She's also a wife and a mom. So she was able to be on this panel and talk about work-life balance from the visceral and very practical and very real hand-to-hand compact of trying to figure this out. Miki, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark. Excited to be here.
I'm so happy to just talk with you and share you, because the vibe I get from you is not your resume. The vibe I get from you is not like any specific thing. It's you're just so engaged in life, and you're so engaged in connection, that I found it really compelling to see and to learn about you, and to learn real time on mic, so that other people can learn about what it's like to grow up, accomplish things, raise a family, right? And now in the middle of COVID and racial unrest and financial, like the hellscape that seems to be America these
That's
days.
right. That's right.
Uh, uh, you know, uh, just to have a conversation with you about that and share that. You
Absolutely.
game?
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
So right now it's we're recording this in late August. So your
Yep,
kids are you're navigating. How old are your kids?
that's right. My kids are 14 and 11, so I have a rising high school freshman and a sixth grader.
So tell me about your decision-making process about what to do about them going back to school, because
Yeah,
my kids are older, so I'm not thinking about that.
right, right.
But
Yeah.
how do you navigate? How do you have those conversations with your husbands, with your kids, and make those decisions?
Yeah, so it's been a tough time, as you said, Mark. There are so many factors at play. There are so many, conversations to be had. It is literally a daily conversation. My kids are in independent schools. So they're in schools where there are smaller classrooms, or there's a smaller population overall, and then there are smaller classrooms. And so we have made the decision, and I will say this, and I say this without a bit of shame. We say in this house all the time that any decision that we make in this climate that we're in is good for 24 hours. There could be news that happens tomorrow or tonight
Mm.
that flips any decision on its head. So we have made the decision as of today that our children will go back to in-person learning. We have read through all of the policies, practices, procedures around safety for both of their schools. We have sat in on countless webinars and conversations with the teachers, the administrators. And so we are comfortable with having them in an in-person environment. Again, as of today, that is the day that
So
this
actually, you
decision.
just that is the most one of the most fascinating things I've heard over the last couple months
uh,
is making decisions for what you know today.
for
That's
what you
that
know
that's
today.
that's leading and living in a time of crisis and a time of challenge, 101,
Absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
tell me about that. How did you come up with that as a family culture?
Yeah, there was a time when, early, both of my oldest son, both of my children play sports, but my oldest, because obviously he's older, is much more engaged in his sports teams and much more committed. And we've done the whole travel sports thing for both of them. But I will tell you that earlier this summer, his AAU basketball team was making the decision, probably in the June timeframe, to go back to practicing outdoors. And so we thought, okay, we'll let them practice outdoors. They're a handful of kids. We'll let them do that. And then the time came for them to begin playing in tournaments. and playing in tournaments that were indoors, in some cases in other states. And we decided, yeah, we're not so comfortable with that. We didn't know how well mask requirements would be enforced. We knew that there would be kids coming in from other states to play with our kids. And so we ended up making the really tough decision to not have him play basketball this summer. And for our family, that was a huge deal because we spend every single weekend, Mark, we've talked about this, traveling around and gathering our stuff.
Yeah,
And,
ours was baseball. It was
right.
crazy.
Yeah. And you know that travel sports it could be the death of a family if you don't control it. Right. So it's been so much a part of our lives. And so we made the decision not to have him play on the basketball team. And we told him then that we would revisit it if the time came and if the time was right. And across the course of the next several weeks and everything else, there was information that was constantly happening and changing. And we thought, we still weren't comfortable with it. But what we did know was that we had to give ourselves the space and the grace to be able to ingest any information that was available and then make a decision based on that. So it just, in some ways, it sort of naturally happened. My husband and I were 100% in agreement with this idea that there's no decision that we can make right now that is permanent.
So was that an overt conversation you had with your kids? Like, let's actually, we're going to evaluate each day. We're going to make decisions on each day. Nothing is permanent.
Yes,
To get an agreement with the family. So
yes.
this is how we figure things out.
Yes, that is a conversation that we absolutely did have with the kids.
How old are your kids?
14 and 11.
Okay.
And both of them are extremely conscious of what's happening, what's going on, and they were in agreement with that. And they're the good news about those conversations is that when you involve children in the decision, not so much in the decision-making process, but certainly in the conversation that leads up to the decision, there seems to be less pushback because we got to the end of the conversation about basketball. And I have to tell you, and you don't often hear this from a 14-year-old, my 14-year-old said to us, we should do whatever you guys think is best. How often does that happen?
I think for me, as the world gets scarier, right?
Right.
If your parents are somewhat sane, somewhat present, there's the safe place.
Exactly.
And if you can provide that, for your kids in the middle of all of this, I think that I don't think you can say enough about that because I think the peer group is less important as the outside world looks safe. So let's stay on the subject with your kids because
Sure.
I said, oh, you're raising two Black kids, and you immediately said two Black boys.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're upper middle class, kids are in private school, right? Educated out the wazoo, insulated from a lot.
Yeah.
And still, in a conversation with me, it was like, no, Mark, there's a distinction here.
There is a distinction. There is absolutely a distinction. And I think that distinction is so important because there is almost an expectation or a presumption of achievement of Black women and Black girls. It is almost expected. And I'm a product of that in many ways. So I don't, I can't underscore that enough. In classrooms and in almost every environment, there is a presumption that little Black girls are good girls in many cases. Now I know that there are statistics around
and will overachieve.
And will overachieve. I was that child. I saw it happening. I mean, I saw it happening 40 years ago in classrooms. I saw the differences in how I was treated versus how Black boys were treated, even in my classroom. So that presumption, that underlying expectation is real. It's real.
It's even in the vernacular. I was listening to Joy Reid interviewing Kamala Harris's new chief of staff. It was the first woman of color to be chief of staff of a major candidate or something like that. And they were talking about Kamala and each other, and they went off on a little tangent on Black girl magic.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's actually such a beautiful thing,
Yes.
to actually have that pride and to have that be in the culture.
Yes.
Black girl
A-
magic. That's so
Absolutely.
awesome. But
Yep.
now you're raising two sons.
That's right. And I like to think of it as Black girl power,
Mm.
because I think in that mystique, there is such power. But on the other hand, with respect to Black boys, that expectation and that presumption is almost exactly the opposite. There is such a dichotomy. There is such um, an underlying there is such an underlying expectation of where our Black boys will be and what they can achieve, and everything about our society is set up almost in a way that that expectation just sort of prevails in every single way.
So
So
you just haven't made me think of something I've never thought of before in my life. And fix me if I'm totally off. Is I would think that black young men, black men, either have to be Barack Obama, you know, constitutional scholars, overeducated,
yes,
unbelievably polite and articulate,
yes,
Eddie Glaude Jr., like all these like, or they're hip hop. Like they don't get to be just plain, average guys. They gotta go to an extreme of some sort. And
that
I'm wondering if there's a pressure. Uh,
there is most certainly a pressure, and there is the Washington Post has really did a study about probably reported on a study about 5 or 6 years ago about a presumption of guilt of Black boys and children as early as preschool. And it's incredibly astounding to think about the fact that if a Black boy is not, sitting in his seat, completely silent and completely still, then he is somehow a threat. He is somehow a problem. He is somehow, he is going to be sent to the principal's office. He is much more likely to be sent to the principal's office, much more likely to be suspended for being a child, for behaving in the way that a child behaves. And in many ways, behaving in the way that boys behave. I mean, you've raised sons, so you know that, there are certain physical tendencies of boys to be in motion more, to just be acting sort of physiologically different. But that presumes guilt for many Black boys, unfortunately. And so I do think that distinction is important. That distinction, when you said raising two Black children, I think I'm my parenting challenge and everything that I have to bring to child rearing and to preparing my children for the world is quite different, because I am raising Black boys, and I have to raise them to understand how the world will perceive them. Now, I am raising them to perceive themselves and how they carry themselves in a certain way. And it's not about just, respectability. It's about, caring for yourself and hygiene and all of those things, of course. But it's also,
which is hard to teach teenage boys.
which is hard to teach teenage boys. But it's also understanding that when you walk into the world, however you show up, is not necessarily going to be perceived the way that you perceive yourself. So you always have to understand how you're being perceived by the rest of the world.
So, and I love being able to talk to you about this, because I think you're insightful. How do you balance uh, the world is out to get you? There are things in society that are dangerous, in particular towards you. There's realities that you have to live with,
Yeah.
and keep them out of the victim mentality, keep them out of, reacting to that, so that they can live their own autonomous life, create their own future and all that. How do you balance those two things?
Right. Well, one, I think that we have to create at home the kind of environment that is nurturing and that is a safe place, and that shows them that no matter what you face outside, this is the safe place. This is going to be your refuge. So my husband and I are intentional about creating that. Now, that is a tough balance too in and of itself, right? Because even at home, you have to discipline. I'm still going to yell at you if you don't take the trash out. You're still going to be restricted from your phone if I see you using social media too much. So there's a balance there too. But the first piece of it is trying to create a nurturing and stable and loving home that really helps them build a strong sense of self. For us, our faith is a huge part of that, helping them understand who they are in this family, helping them understand who they are in our broader family, and helping them understand who they are in God. And so that's a huge part of it for us. And then helping them understand that when you step outside this house, the rules for you are different. So if you're with your group of friends, and we live in a predominantly white community, if you are with your group of friends and something goes down, you need to understand that when authorities show up and there's one of you, they are going to see you differently from the rest of the group. And so you need to carry yourself in a way that does not cast doubt, because there's already an underlying
So
doubt.
again, that hypervigilance. You got
Hypervigilant,
to go.
eyes
You got to
wide
go
open.
Barack Obama, or
That's
you
right.
go hip hop, right?
That's right.
Because you're not
Eyes
going to
wide
be
open.
perceived as just a run-of-the-mill,
That's right.
dumb teenager.
That's exactly right. And I, kind of our mantra here is the rules are different for you. We tell them that almost daily. The rules are different for you. So even if you are just laughing in the hallway with a group of friends, the rules are different for you. You have to understand that, and you have to understand the perception that others may have of you. Still bring your whole self. You don't need to be a different person, but you need to understand that in situations where you are in the presence of others, that underlying presumption of guilt always exists for you. And so don't do anything to perpetuate that.
Yeah, I've been having this conversation a lot lately, and every time I have this conversation, I have to hold back tears because having two young men, I'm raised to, and I know just how hard it was for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Affluent neighborhood, two white kids. They got crap for being Jewish.
Yeah.
But not it was they still had to navigate all that. Then when you throw in all these extra factors, it's really hard for me to not viscerally feel what a parent feels like to have to hold their child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that happens to my child is 10 times worse in my own heart than it is even for them,
right? Yeah.
So I just honor your strength and your courage and your honesty in having this conversation with me. So I appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely.
So
And I think it's so important to highlight it, Mark. And I will add to all of this that even given those realities, our home is one of joy, and we laugh and we play and we enjoy each other. And there is not, and I want to be clear about this for any of your listeners who think that Black families are living under a dark cloud. That is not the case, because I think we are a people who have been able to find joy and resilience and laughter even in the midst of harsh realities over centuries, right? So you see that in photos and in stories of our ancestors. But I also want to be clear that it is also true now. It is not the case that there is a cloud of depression or anything like that lives over our home. I think that's important to note, because I do think that particularly people, non-Black people, I think wonder that sometimes, are we living under a cloud? And so we live with this reality, and yet we find joy and laughter and fun, even in the midst of all that surrounds us.
And again, that's a testament again to good parenting and some awareness, is how to not make it your identity. Some of
Absolutely
the challenges that are in society are not your identity. They're not. Yes. They are a piece of your life. They are not your life.
Yes.
And that's and that goes with everybody, whether you have I talk to people who have children with disabilities. I talk, even just nerdy kids who get bullied at school. It's just so brutal. Both of my kids went through times of being bullied and things like that. So it's a whole perspective building thing. So now
Absolutely. Yeah.
let's find out why your son's mom. I'm not talking to their dad, so I would ask that. But then, so tell me your origin story. Tell me how you became who you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chesapeake, Virginia, the daughter of a Baptist pastor. And so that is everything that you think it means. I have two wonderful parents who I'm fortunate to still have with us today. And growing up in Chesapeake, Virginia, I always knew that I wanted to do something more than live in Chesapeake, Virginia. And I made my way to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I went to University of Pennsylvania, and I went to the Wharton undergraduate program at Penn. And Penn was an amazing experience for me because I'd really never lived outside the South. I'd never lived outside of communities very much like my own. And it was this hugely eye-opening experience first of all, I was meeting for the first time Black folks whose grandparents went to college. What was that? I mean, that was unbelievable to me. And
I love
so
my partner's from the South, and he didn't meet a Jewish person until he was in college. So
right. I don't think I did either, Mark. If I did, I didn't know it. And so this incredibly vast world of diversity in every single way. And so it's a terrific experience. I left there, moved to the Washington, D.C. area. Where I began a career in marketing and business development and sales. Started at the advisory board company, which folks in DC know that this is one of the sort of hallmarks of the DC area. Many of us think of it as our grooming grounds, and I went from there to and again, sales, marketing, business development. Went from there back to law school. My intention for so long was to do a JD MBA program, but by the time I got around to going to law school, I didn't have 4 years to spend. I didn't have 4 years to spend, so I did the JD program. Came out and practiced for a brief while, but ultimately landed back in marketing business development. In fact, right after practicing in a law firm, I went into another law firm where I was running marketing for one of the practice groups. And so the world of communicating the value proposition of an organization, of a product, of a service, has really kind of been at the heart of my career. And so I went from marketing and business development in the healthcare practice group of a global law firm, to then making my way into the media space, where I've been for the better part of the last decade. And so I started out at Politico, launching its first B2B subscription products, where we were selling to law firms, lobbying firms, Capitol Hill. Ultimately built out a team there at Politico, really from the ground up in many ways, and was asked by the CEO to join his broader executive team, where I would, as VP of operations, where I was helping with a number of functions, building out the infrastructure of what in those days was still in the latter stages of being a startup. And so spent several years there, and then was asked by our former CEO at Politico to join him at the Washington Post shortly after he had gone there, after being hired by our owner. And so I've been now at the Washington Post for close to 5 years, and I run all of our consumer marketing, branding, and subscriptions business at.
the TikTok guy.
And I know the TikTok guy.
I love that guy. He's just
yeah, no, he's great.
He was perfect for COVID, and I can't. He's probably undervalued at the Washington Post. I'm just going to tell you.
He's phenomenal. Now, I will tell you. What's been exciting about my role at the Post is we are really, I'd say, we have a bird's eye view to everything that is happening right now. For a news organization to be sitting where we are in the midst of a pandemic, a presidential election, racial injustice and unrest, and financial and economic crisis all at once, is really, as you might imagine, quite combination of things for a news organization to be grappling with, and be able to communicate the value proposition of news and journalism to our audience in such a crucial time. I think really is a huge weight. and one that we take very seriously.
Got it. So let's go back to Miki, because that's what I'm interested in. So
Hmm.
one of the premises of mastering midlife is that the drives and motivations in your 20s and 30s start to wane and change in your 40s and 50s. So your kids are still at home, and
Yep.
what are the drives and motivations that got you to be so successful? What drove you through school,
Yeah.
getting your law degree, but changing direction? What motivates you?
I think that the idea of achieving and having an impact has always been a huge driver for me. I used to read stories about men and women who were just making major contributions to their communities. I've always been impressed with the stories of business leaders who would come in and buy computers for everybody in the whole school district. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I've always wanted. I've looked at it and always wanted somehow to be able to do. And I've always felt, I've always strongly believed that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I've always wanted to be able to give more. And there was something that always let me know that the more I have, the more I achieve, the more I will be able to give and the more impact I will have.
So
So
impact is what.
impact, I would say impact would be that driver.
So you're a bit of an overachiever, right?
You think?
I'll diagnose you as a bit of an overachiever,
Oh, okay, I'll
uh,
take it.
and you're impact driven. So you know that when you put some work into something, that it's actually going to make a difference, which makes you want to work more because you can, like
Yeah,
you can feed more people if you put some more hours or raise some more money or something like
that's
that.
right. Yep.
But then you and I met talking about work-life balance.
Yeah.
So how does an overachiever who gets her esteem from what she accomplishes, how she impacts the world, and that kind of thing, how do you take care of yourself?
So, Mark, I have gotten really serious about how I take care of myself lately.
Why?
I, I see the mental health challenges of particularly of the Black community, on Black women in particular. So we started this conversation talking about the presumption of achievement and success of Black women. But let me tell you, much of that has been Black women taking care of everybody else. And in the meantime, we're having heart attacks and strokes and diabetes, and and it's really, really challenging to watch. A year and a half ago, my mother had, I think I might have shared this when we were together. My mother had double bypass surgery. She suffered a heart attack and stroke in the early part of last year. And let me tell you, I have seen my entire life, my mother has given and given and given and given herself to everyone, to her family, to her marriage, to her children, to her church. And I have seen firsthand, up close, the impact of what that looks like when your body, your mind, and everything says, you know what, no more. And so, here we are. Both of my grandparents died before the age of 70. Both of my grandmothers died before the age of 70. And so I've been able to now, as a 40-something woman, look at all of that and say, that's not going to be the life I choose. Now, anything could happen on any day. I
Sure, sure,
understand
sure.
that. But the life I choose will not be one where my demise comes from me not taking care of myself. So
It's so funny
that,
because there's always something that clicks in for
yes,
self-care when you said, "Oh, no, I now know that that's important."
I now know, yeah, and I would say, and certainly in the last year, but I would say over the last 2 to 3 years, where I've really begun to take it seriously. Okay, so I'm saying I take it seriously, but what does that actually mean? How does that play out? What does that look like for me? So number one, I am careful about what I say yes to, really careful, and I will and I don't necessarily think that I have a formula, but number one, I think that if it goes back to that impact question that we talked about, that impact sort of driver. If I can do something that has real impact and I really believe is helping people, I believe that the time we're spending today is that. I believe that the time that we spent together when we met back in November is exactly that. And so if I can participate in something that is going to be helpful to people, And I can do it with sort of minimal impact to my overall well-being. I'm going to do it in most cases. If I can say yes to something that's going to contribute to the well-being and health of my family, I'm going to say yes to that. But there are many things that I say no to. I can give you an example. I don't do a lot of responding to, can I pick your brain on this topic for, I have a client who wants to pick your brain on this topic for 45 minutes and will pay you. Probably not. Right. Those are the kinds of solicitations.
It's hard to pick and choose those things. Like I wrote a book called Only Tens.
Yeah.
Those things.
Yes.
Those things may be actually a 9. Like I really want to help.
Right.
I could use the money. They'll be fun.
Right.
Right. Like, but it's not a 10. It's not the most.
Not a 10.
The most important thing for me may be taking 2 hours for myself before the kids come home. Right. Yes. So that I can be the best mom, wife, husband. Whatever. So that's really tough to make those decisions.
It's tough to make those decisions, but I think the starting point, Mark, is teaching folks and having people begin to just think through it, even if you're conscious about it. Because if you're just a yes person, if you just say yes to things because you are a yes person, and I always say whenever I'm talking to someone about what makes me different from others in the workplace and sort of how I show up at, as an executive or at the board table, I would say that one distinction is I think of myself as a start at yes person, right? Like if we're thinking about a project or an investment or something that and an innovation, let's start at yes and figure out how we get there. But in my personal life, I'll draw a little bit of a distinction here. I'm not starting at yes with, can you join us for X? Right? If the investment is primarily my own time, energy, attention, then I've got to think about, okay, let's think about the why. Like where is the impact going to be for this? And if the why lines up, if it's a 10, then I give a yes. And so I think there's a distinction.
But I teach people, you don't have to say no, you don't have to say yes. And what I learned was, may I get back to you on that? That just breaks the automatic yes. May I get back? And it could be 5 minutes later, it could be an hour later, it could be after I phone a friend.
Right.
I don't really, I want to do this, but I can't. Like, can you give me the strength to say no? Like,
I love that. And even if most of us gave ourselves sort of 48 hours, one, you're going to think of 15 things that you didn't think of in the moment that you were asked. Two, you're going to think about, like, is there some heart space here for that? If it's not, if the day that I'm going to do it, I'm going to be mostly dreading it, then I'm probably going to say there might be someone else better for this.
So the chief marketing officer for the Washington Post, someone with a law degree, an overachiever, just said the word heart space. Is there heart space in there for me? There is room to be wildly successful, wildly impactful, and still have heart space.
Absolutely. And that's just so important, Mark. a lot of people, I've talked to a couple of friends, people who I consider close friends, who will say things like, I'm so sick of everything that I'm seeing on social media about the back to school debate and the reopening and And it occurred to me, I don't even know what those conversations are about, because I don't have the heart space for that. I do not have the heart space to read every comment on every, Washington Post article that is posted on social media. I don't have the heart space for that. And what I'm going to give my time, attention, and energy to is that which I'm going to intentionally make heart space for.
So good. So let's see how do we wrap? I could talk to you for hours. So what would you like to share with working moms? What do you want working moms to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. One, I would say, embrace the season that you're in. We talked a little bit about this in our prior conversation.
That was part of your talk.
Loved that. Yeah. I think it's so important to embrace the season, Mark. I have an 11 and 14-year-old at home. I've been working from home since early March. And my journey right now is very different from the mom who has a 1 and a 4-year-old at home. And so I think that understanding where you are and embracing the season where you are is so important. And if that means for you that if you're working from home, or if you are an essential worker and you have to go outside the home, whatever that means for you, creating the space to meet yourself in the season where you are is so incredibly important. It could be that, maybe you're not as strict about the 7:30 bedtime because you really do need that hour and a half in the evening to connect with them after you come home. Understand where you are in this season and be intentional about how you're going to show up for your family in this moment. And it's going to look different than what it looked like 6 or 9 months ago. And it's okay. No one's going to, or let me back up. Let me also say that if in this season that means that you need to strictly enforce the 7:30 bedtime because you need the 2 hours at the end of the
Right?
day, then do that.
I saw a meme. It said, "I love you with all my heart more than anything in the entire world. Now go to bed."
That's exactly
Because
right.
I
That's
need.
exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly it. If now is the time when you want to be strict about the bedtime, and don't for a second feel guilty about that because it's summer or because it's COVID or whatever it is. Create the space to do what you have to do to keep yourself and your family healthy in this season.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, if people want to get in touch with you and find out what you're up to, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm everywhere on social media. I'm Miki.King0509 on Instagram. I'm at Miki King 0509 on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me anywhere. I always say to folks, I don't even carry business cards because I'm so easy to find.
I'll put all those links in the show notes.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And if anyone is wondering what 0509 are, they are the years that my children were born. So Miki King 0509.
Miki, I'm so glad I met you and that our lives paths crossed. Thank you for sharing yourself on the show with the audience. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
To everybody else, I love these conversations. Every time I end a podcast, I feel like I've changed the world a little bit by introducing you to some wisdom, some insight that I don't have. So if you like this conversation, please share it. Please tell people about Miki and the wisdom that we just uncovered here. And then also take care of yourself. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.